Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 147 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today's episode is so timely to me. I am just amazed sometimes at how things work out. So if you all remember 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Cassie, Ella's mom. Now, Ella died of a very rare tumor, which the specific name I am not going to remember right now, but it was very closely related to a rhabdoid tumor. So she ended up being treated by pediatric oncologists, even though she was an adult, because rhabdoid tumors, although they are rare, are more common in kids. If you remember back, Cassie and her husband then started a foundation that really focuses on helping researchers for these rare cancers like rhabdoid tumors. And they are helping these researchers really by having conferences where they can gather together and kind of learn about what people are doing so they can learn from each other and be able to more quickly really come up with new treatments for these rare tumors. Today, I am really excited to speak with Sahar, Kian's mom. Now, little did I know when I booked this interview, but Kian too died of a rhabdoid tumor. And Kian's parents have also started a foundation to help raise money for research for these rare pediatric tumors. I just wanted to put this all in your head so that you could think about that a little bit as you are listening to Sahar talk about Kian. So although Kian was very, very young when he had his tumor, and Ella was an adult when she had her tumor, there are so many similarities. And the fact that the foundations that these parents both formed are so intertwined is just amazing. I found myself wondering if some of the people who attended the conference in France now are able to get money from Kian's parents from that organization as well. The world seems so big at times, but in other times it seems so small, and our lives are just so intertwined. So right now, I want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Sahar, Kian's mom. Thank you so much, Sahar, for coming on the Always Andy's Mom podcast. I really look forward to talking.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, that's great. And you get to tell us about your little son, Kian. And I am so excited to hear about him.
Oh man, he's wonderful. I mean, he came into this world a little just stubborn. He was like, he wouldn't turn, right? So he wouldn't turn for the birth. And so he was like jammed against a rib, like not quite like ready to to make his entrance easily. But he was, once he got here, he was just like this pile of love. I have an older daughter. And she was not a great sleeper.
Okay.
Had a lot of very loud demands and wanted those needs to be met. And Kian was very easy. You know how they say it's like parents always have an easy kid and like a kid that's, a little bit more demanding or a little bit clearer of what their wants are. And Kian was just super chill, very happy baby. Loved to nurse, loved to snuggle, was a pretty good sleeper. So as an infant, he was like a joy. I mean, his sister loved him. It was like just a beautiful, cohesive experience that he kind of like brought into our family.
How far apart are they in age?
They are 2 years, 4 months.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like nervous, right? Because you're like, when you have kids that are that close, like, will they fight all the time? Is there going to be a lot of jealousy? Like, 2-year-olds are,
Yeah.
2-year-olds.
Yeah. I had mine were 2 years, 1 month, and the first two, and then it was May, June, July, 2 years, 3 months. So yeah, about the same.
Yeah. So, it's like the 2-year-old is still very like attached to you, but independent, but like unable to clearly communicate what they need. And so like lots of meltdowns. And then you got a newborn who's like, just actually really needs you to survive. So.
I know. I remember too, though, that within just a few weeks, actually, after Andy was born, my daughter looked at a family picture and said, "Where Andy?" Because she was like, "Andy should be there. Like, there shouldn't be a family picture in the house without Andy in it." And like, well, he wasn't here yet. That was even before he was in mommy's tummy. But I thought at that moment, I thought, oh, we're good. We are good. Because she feels like he's a permanent member of the family, and any kind of picture of life before Andy should just not even be there.
Right? Yes. Yeah. I know. It's like interesting. But yeah, Kian was just an easy baby, really happy. He was diagnosed like super early. And even through all that, he was just a joyful baby. So.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So you said he was diagnosed early. He was diagnosed pretty young then.
Yes.
Wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. So, a little bit of a rough delivery. And then we got like this very happy baby. And I would say like almost what from the outside was like a bit of an idyllic 3 months of experience. And then, I kept taking him to the pediatrician because I was like, he's doing really well, but something just feels kind of off. And they would do the belly checks and they would be like, well, he's gaining weight. He's fine. Nervous mom, like just take him home and love on your kid. It's totally cool. And so one day, he was such a happy baby. There was one day that we had him and he just would not stop fussing. And he didn't want to nurse and he didn't want to do anything else. And so I called the pediatrician. I was like, I have to bring them in. They're like, oh, it could be a sore throat. Do you want to wait until the morning? I'm like, no, I need to bring them in right now. Something is not right.
Yeah.
And so I took him in and like, it was almost immediate. They were like, they saw him and they basically sent us to the hospital for imaging.
Oh.
And so at that point, we went into the hospital and I thought, they're going to tell me it's gas. It's something weird. Like, I'm just nervous. I was hoping that they would confirm like that I was insane and not that there was something actually like going on with my child. And so my husband met us at the hospital and he took him for his first set of imaging. And I will never forget like the look on Mike's face when he like walked in and I was like, oh no, this is not good.
Yeah.
And he was like, listen, we got to do more. They're admitting us into the hospital and it looks like there might be a tumor. And so it was that day, like he, 3 months old, thought I had a perfectly healthy baby. He had just had his 3-month checkup, told me he was great.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, we're getting admitted into the oncology unit at the hospital.
Where are you located again?
Just outside of DC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that started this whole long but not long journey then, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it did. Yep. I remember going into that hospital or into the unit and I'm like a mess, right? I had just given birth 3 months ago, like talk about hormones and like I had a 2.5-year-old and, breastfeeding and they're like, don't worry. Like, 9 times out of 10, it's a Wilms tumor, highly curable. Like, our radiologists are the best. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, don't worry, mom, you got this. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Okay.
And, he had surgery. They were able to completely remove the tumor, which was on his kidney as well as the kidney. And then, that sinking feeling you get, like when like you're just still waiting for the other shoe to drop and you're like, can't possibly be this easy. Like, I didn't just go through this for it to them be like, yeah, fine. No worries. Like 1 round of chemo may not even need chemo. And like, you're totally fine. Just how like sick he was. When we came in for the diagnosis, I just knew something was like wrong. I mean, the doctors like pulled us in for, first of all, we had unscheduled testing that happened. And then they pulled us into a room with like several social workers. The doctor herself looked kind of nervous and concerned. And they go, we're really sorry, but your son has a malignant rhabdoid tumor, which is really rare, and we have not seen an infant survive this.
Oh. Yeah.
And it was just devastating. I mean, he was such a happy, beautiful child that brought so much love into our home. And then to hear them say, 6 to 8 months was like soul crushing.
Yeah. Yeah. So they did try some treatments though, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So they give us this diagnosis, and like, of course, like I'm just sitting there crying, like, oh my God, my baby, my baby, my baby.
Right.
And then all right, well, there's a catastrophe right now, but I got to like get the next steps and kind of like move on. I mean, my dad was with us at the apartment. He just like flat out left the room. He was like just in shock and like processing.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't remember. I think Mike was just like,
yeah,
unable to speak. And I just like looked at the doctor. I was like, okay, so what's next?
Right.
Okay, what do we do? And she was like, well, we're gonna go through like chemotherapy. We're gonna try this types. We're gonna do 9 rounds of chemo, and then we're gonna do radiation, and we're gonna hope that it doesn't come back. And he goes, oh, and we have to do all like this genetic testing, because when it presents in like children that are this age, it's likely a genetic compound. So then of course, like you're worried about your daughter, and then like yourselves, and future children, and all the other things that all of a sudden come up when you hear the word genetics, right? And a week after that, we started treatment. So he went into the hospital, and of course then there's like a brain MRI and all this other stuff, and it's all just very terrifying. So
yeah,
Kian did really well. He went through 9 rounds of chemo, no delays, no sickness, like no septicemia or any of the things that are common when a person undergoes chemo, and he did that all in 6 months.
Wow.
Yep. He was so strong. He was like, throughout this all, super happy, thriving, gaining weight, just a very, very amazing child, right? I took him to his pediatrician, and his pediatrician was like, I'm surprised he doesn't have any even social delays being in and out of hospital so much. But that's just, I think he had so much, we had so much support around us that, I mean, we were really fortunate in that regard. So he went through all of his treatment, got a clean bill of health, went into remission, and then the pandemic hit. He was still in remission. And I have to say, like, it was a little bit of a blessing being on lockdown with each other, because we were forced to spend so much time as a family and find joy in ways that were not like instinctive to us, right? So normally it's like, oh, go to this birthday party, or go do that thing, or take him to this thing. And then instead it was like, well, we're just in the woods.
Yeah, right.
Four of us like playing in a pond. And then in September of 2020, he unfortunately relapsed. Yeah, which was honestly, they said, a shock to the doctors. The doctor, I remember, she was like, I just didn't expect this. He was doing so well. And we normally see this cancer come back much faster, much sooner.
Yeah. So they were sort of hopeful that he was going to kind of, be a little miracle and not recur.
Yes. And I mean, I already think like he had beaten so many odds, right? They didn't think he was going to make it to 1, right? And so he made it to 1, and he made it to 2. Like,
really?
Yeah, he made it to 2. He passed 2 weeks after his 2nd birthday, but I mean, he made it.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. That is really amazing that he went that long.
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember throughout his treatment, I think that, my personal belief is like our thoughts and our actions kind of help carry us, right? When things are really hard. And I used to write quotes and affirmations and like put them all over his hospital wall. So every time we'd be there for treatment, I would just put those on there. And as we're like walking around holding the baby, I would just like read them around out loud. Like, I'm praying for patience and guidance, or, you are a miracle, and just things like that. And I mean, I don't know how else we would have gone through it, but I can't help, or I want to believe that that's part of what helped kind of propel him and our family as we were dealing with all of it.
So when it did recur, was it then relatively quickly that he passed?
He relapsed on September 1st, and then he passed on January 2nd. Okay. So there was 4 months of like official reoccurrence. I kind of knew something was wrong. I called the doctors in July being like, hey, something feels weird again. And they're like, well, is he eating? I was like, yeah. Is he sleeping? Yes. Is he playing? Yeah. Okay. Well, just bring him in for the next scan.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I think that, I don't know, that mommy radar is so important. I know I trust that so much.
Yeah.
As a pediatrician, I feel like, and I think probably a little more so now after losing Andy, probably even more than I used to, just after having spoken to so many moms. And I always feel kind of bad because I think I'm quicker to do a scan or do a lab or do anything because I know far too many people whose children have died. So I always feel a little bit bad sometimes when I see parents, because I think if you would have gotten somebody else, they probably wouldn't be quite as freaked out as I am. But and I will apologize on occasion, but they're usually actually quite thankful that I'm just like really worried. But I do feel like I have gone the opposite direction now than I probably should have.
I would tell you, if you were our pediatrician, I'd be so thankful, because like, that's what we want. That's like what I personally want, is someone to take the anxiety and hold it for me, and be like, don't worry. Like, I'll let you know when it's time to worry. And I'm like 10 times more worried than you are.
Okay. You know what? That makes me feel a little better.
Yeah, no, totally.
Because that is exactly what I do. I take on that anxiety quite a bit. And I'm like, I need to do a scan of the head or I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. Right.
Yeah.
and so I really do take that on. That makes me feel better. Thank you so much, Sahar. Now I'm not feeling quite as
that's okay.
Guilty that I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So,
and I have to say, I loved Kian's oncology team. They were fantastic. His doctor was one of those people who is like, I would rather be overly cautious and concerned, give you the peace of mind to be more present with your child, knowing that I've got it, than a little bit more like, just wait and see. So, I mean, they really did not have anything. And I mean, it could have just been the tumor at that point might have even been too small to have caught on a scan. Right. And then it could have been worse. So, I definitely don't doubt their decision to do this. It is just one of those things that you're like, I wish we had a way to scientifically test mommy spider sense, in a way that wasn't intrusive and conclusive and, all that stuff. But definitely appreciate our doctors and everything they've done.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think about that, that very first visit that you had about her seeming like she was uncomfortable. This is the same doctor that she was uncomfortable telling you and things like that. And coming in with the whole team like she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's been really on my heart. And I've been talking about it a little bit recently in the podcast about trying to help healthcare providers maybe do that a little bit better, because we're really not trained to do that. You'd think they would really know exactly what they're doing, but they really just don't.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel for the team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. And I have to give credit where it's due. I don't know if I could do it, right? I don't know if I could be a pediatrician or an oncologist or any of that stuff, because I do feel like those doctors do a little bit emotionally attached to these kids, right? So their successes or, the milestones that they reach, the milestones they don't reach affect them not just as much, but they affect them like they affect the parents and the rest of the family.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. When you have a patient that has a hard diagnosis, it is hard on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is important to try to kind of figure out how to care for yourself in those instances too. And I talked to just a group of physicians and nurses and recently about that and about delivering bad news, and especially the bad news that your child or your loved one has died, and how it's not always the best thing to come in with the social worker and the chaplain and whatever, because it gets it off on this. Sometimes I think they don't even hear you, especially if it's a chaplain.
Yeah.
If it's a chaplain, you look at the collar, the cross, the whatever, and you're like, okay, no. Right. And you're just not even hearing what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that's true. Every time a chaplain would walk in when Kian was even doing well, I'd be like, please leave. I don't need counseling right now. I just need to stay in this happy thought bubble that I've created.
And I think it's great. And what I suggested actually to these people that I spoke with, I said, I would suggest that you have the chaplain come with you, but have them stay in the hallway.
Yes.
And then you go through your conversation and then you say, there's a chaplain in the hallway. Would you like to speak with him or her?
Yeah.
And then give that option, because then they would be like, oh yeah, I think that sounds good. Or nope, I don't think I can do that right now. And I was thinking very much about you. So I listened to you on another podcast that you were on with a friend of yours, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We should give her a little shout out. What's the podcast?
It's called Trigger to Life by Cammy Wolf, and she is amazing. So,
there we go. So I listened to that and I heard you talk about, and now you've shared it again today, about the different responses that you had when you were all told that. You said grandpa left the room.
Yeah.
Dad, you're not really sure what was happening. He was just kind of in shock and numb. And you were like, okay, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And how important it is to be able to read the family and know where they are.
Yeah.
Because sometimes doctors are quick to do, okay, this is what we do next, because they're so uncomfortable with the entire situation and like, okay, let's just go into treatment.
Yeah.
And sometimes families aren't ready for that. Now, I did use you, not your name, as an example on someone who was ready and needed to do that very first thing, needed to go like, okay, this is what we do next. And then I said, but now be patient with that same person. If in a few hours or in a few days, now you need to backtrack and like, okay, I need to take this all in. Right.
Totally.
But yet, had you both been in your husband's shoes, or certainly grandpa or whatever, the better choice would have been to sit in the moment for a while and to be there.
Yes.
If you're not ready to go on, okay, this is what we're going to do, then we just need to be present and just need to know I'm here for you. This is hard. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of information that you can't take right now or you don't want right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's such a delicate dance, especially when you've got multiple personalities and processing styles in the room. So difficult to navigate, right? Like I can't always navigate it even within my own family, like, cause we all have different processing styles.
Right.
And it's a lot to ask someone who doesn't know you all that well to like, meet each of you where you're at. Right. So,
right. And to try to read the room a little bit as to what you need to do and making sure that as best as you can, various people are getting what they need in the moment. Yeah. Right. And knowing that you may be absorbing, these are the next steps or what we're going to need to do, but the other people in the room may not have absorbed that at all.
Totally.
And then you may have to revisit it many times and revisit a lot of different situations. So
yes. I think that's like great advice, is just trying to read the room, meeting them where they're at, and then understanding there might be like a little backtracking or repetition or, reminding.
For sure. I mean, I can certainly think back. I will always remember the words that were said to me by the paramedic when Andy died. I will always remember the exact words. There's no question in my mind. But after that, I have absolutely no clue what he said. None.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I really don't know. I think there was definitely something about, are there people you need to call? And then we had to try to track down where a phone was and those types of logistical things. But I'm sure there were other things said. I just don't have any recollection of it at all. So,
I mean, how could you? Like the worst imaginable thing for a parent, when you hear those things, I remember when they told us we were getting admitted, and I don't know if this is how you felt, but I felt like the floor had just gone from underneath me. Like I knew I was walking and I knew I was in a hospital, but I was like disassociated from it. Right. And it was like, have you ever seen the movie like Labyrinth with David Bowie?
I don't think so. Go ahead though, because lots of people probably have.
Okay. Well, there's a scene where like he's walking around and like the stairs keep shifting and people get topsy-turvy and they're chased. It's like a chase scene. And that's how I felt. I felt like even though I knew I was upright and there was still this concept of gravity, I felt like my feet were up, my head was down, and the floor was actually like mush, So,
I can totally relate to that. I like it was the ambulance. The ambulance was like,
yeah.
I mean, nothing seemed really real at all.
Right.
At that moment.
Yeah. I couldn't think. Yeah. And I was just like, I remember that moment. And then I remember getting into the HEMOC hematology oncology unit, but I don't really remember the in between because I think I was just like, in outer space. I don't even know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So let's move ahead now and talk about kind of those times right after Kian died and that grief. Mm-hmm.
I think it sounds weird to say, right? Because like, I don't want to sound like I'm making light of this, or we were really fortunate in the fact that he did not have like a prolonged relapse or even a prolonged, I would say, like an immediate dying period, right? Because, you do talk to some families that sit in pediatric cancer care and their kids suffer agonizing pain for many, many, many months. Mm-hmm. And Kian, for the most part, was pretty good up until like, I would say 3 weeks before he passed. And he was still good then. Like he was still running around and playing. And it was really the last like 4 days of his life.
Wow. That's amazing, actually, that he was still playing.
Amazing. I mean, I fought hard for him, man. Like they gave him a G. So, there's a
G tube. Mm-hmm.
Well, they gave him a GJ. So like every time they wanted to do that, it was like going under fluoroscope and like, the radiologist had to like thread it in and get it past a certain point. I fought for the GJ tube so he wouldn't have to do that, because every time he threw up, the tube would come out and then we'd have to go take him in and hold him down while they this thing. And it was not, so I was like, it's a surgical thing, but it would give him more freedom in his face and it would give us like the ability. And, I remember his doctor came to hospice and I was like, did I make the right calls? And she looked at me and she was like, and this is probably like such a validating feeling. She was like, you went against my better judgment and did what I now believe was the right thing for your son. Mm-hmm. We had so many, I feel like, graces given to us and like how well he did up until like the last 4 days of his life. I never really went to, he's going to die. I was like, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. And then when I got there, I was like, okay, I have to like be here to support him through it. Right. And so I remember the social worker coming and being like, you have to give him permission to pass. And I was like, I don't really want to give him permission to pass. Right. Yeah. Like, who wants to tell your kid like, okay, yeah, sure. But I remember laying in the bed with him. And at that point, we had to put him into like kind of like a medically induced sleep. I don't want to call it a coma, but like he had like what they called restless death syndrome. So even though he was on a ton of medications, he would not sleep.
Oh, wow.
And so we were carrying him around for like 3 days in hospice. And at that point, like we couldn't anymore. Like none of us had slept. And so they sedated him for us. And I remember laying in bed with him and I told him like, they keep telling me I need to tell you it's okay. And I told him, I said, I support your choice. I support like what you need to do and what you want to do. And if you think it's now your time to go, like, we're here, we love you, we support you. And it's safe. It is safe to make that pass.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what a hard thing to have to say.
Yeah. But even having that opportunity is a grace, right? Because as you well know, you don't always get that.
Yeah.
I can't help but not see all those beautiful silver linings in all of our experience, as much as I ache and miss my child.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure people said to you or judged you a bit like, she needs to get ready. She needs to prepare for this. She needs to, that. And when I have talked with other people, other parents who have lost kids to illnesses like this, they, I think of my good friend, Stephanie, who was in therapy for a long time to try to prepare for her daughter's death. And she said she really couldn't. When it came right down to it, she couldn't. So she did all of this prep work. She saw the therapist. She did all this stuff. Like, I'm ready. We're ready. Yeah. And then her daughter died. And actually, it's funny. It's her daughter's Kian.
Oh,
not spelled the same at all, and not Kian, but Kian. Yeah. Anyway, she said she died. And the first thing she thought was, oh, no. I guess I wasn't ready. 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. Right?
5 more minutes.
So that's what's really astounding to me is like, you don't need to pressure yourself in some way to get ready.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to get ready. Because I think the idea of wrapping your head around the idea of your child dying before you is impossible to really grasp.
100%. Yep. Yeah.
So to have people force you to try to go there is not really helpful.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I remember hospice would come and they'd be like, here's a book on preparing yourself for a death of a loved one, or like, how to talk to a loved one about their imminent death. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. Like, and I won't be there until I have to be there. Right. Because as long as he is still breathing air into his lungs and his heart is beating, I believe that there's still hope and a chance because miracles happen. Right. And so I remember like, I basically told hospice one day, I was like, just leave, like either get on my party boat or get off the boat and leave me alone and let me try to be as present as I can with my children without preparing for something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. No. Well, and I think it's fine either way. Certainly. I mean, I'm not going to judge either way. And that I think is the
absolutely.
Key.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
the key is to just not judge either way, because even if you did as much prep and you read all of those books and you did all of that stuff, I can guarantee you wouldn't have really been ready.
Totally.
So
100%. I think that goes back to what you were saying with respect to doctors and people receiving like devastating news is like meet the individual where they're at instead of trying to lead them to somewhere where they're not able to go. Right. Which is, I felt like they were trying to lead me somewhere where I was not ready to go. Yeah. And it's like, and you're right. There's absolutely no judgment. My husband had anticipatory grief. So he had grieved Kian's death before it happened. So for him, those materials were probably much more useful and like helpful than they were for me. And again, like you said, no right or wrong, just being able to meet each individual.
Yeah. I think back to even when I lost my own mother. So my mother died over Christmas of my junior year in college. And my dad actually started dating again relatively quickly and was married actually 7.5 months after my mom died. So very, very
wow.
And I remember when he sat me down and told me that he was kind of engaged and getting married, which is now, 6 months after my mom's death. He said, I grieved your mom a long time before she died. And my mom definitely gave him permission. Like she knew his personality. It was going to be really difficult to be alone. And so she was like, she would tease him like your next wife's going to be a blonde and all of this kind of stuff. She would talk to him about his next wife.
Yeah.
But what was difficult was that he and I were not on the same page there with that. Right. So that was really difficult for me to see him now engaged to be married, not even 6 months after my mom's death, because I wasn't ready for that. But he was in a different place and his grief was certainly different than mine. And I can't judge him on that just because I couldn't do that. He could, and he did. And he's been married to this woman now for a very, very long time. So
yeah, it's hard though, right? Like
it's hard.
It's hard because, I don't know if you felt like this, but with Mike, I felt like he couldn't understand, like we could not understand one another to even have the compassion and non-judgment. Right. So it's, it's a lot of work to get there. Yeah.
I like how you said that you couldn't even understand each other to get that point, to even have the conversation. And I've spoken to others who are like that the couples, that they're husband and wife, and they're on such different pages and grieving so differently that they can't even see how the other one is doing it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it's very hard to hold space for a partner when you are grieving the same thing, right? Because you want validation on how you feel and how you want to move. And that person may not be able to give it to you in that moment. Not that they can't ever, but just there in this one moment where you need it, they may not be able to. And
and that is so key about telling your partner what you need, if you can. we've been going through a very hard time here recently with Andy's 18th birthday and graduation and a lot of stuff happening. And so it's been a very emotional time. And, I had an interaction with somebody and I was just upset and sad and grieving. And, I was saying something to Eric about it, and he started to try to kind of cheer me up a little bit. And I said, I need you to stop right there.
Yeah.
I just need you to be here for me and to be sad with me just for a bit. And he totally did. I mean, we've been going through this enough that he heard me say that and he completely changed his tune and just let me be sad with him, which is what I needed at the moment. I mean, at first he was doing that kind of husbandly thing that I think a lot of men feel like I need to make things better. I need to cheer her up and make her feel better. And it was only when I even said this, I said, Eric, stop.
Yeah.
I very clearly, I said, I don't need that from you right now. I just need you to be upset with me.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And then he went there and he was perfect. And it was the perfect thing. But I feel like I've been doing this long enough now that I could just say to him, just quit. Because if I'd have let him go on, I would have ended up getting angry with him. I wasn't, there was nothing to be angry with him about, but I think it can naturally start to happen.
Totally.
So, and I'm so glad that he was good enough and healthy enough that when I said, stop, he didn't get angry with me.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's so beautiful that you guys were able to each come to that place together.
Yeah. Like, this is what I need from you right now. And he's like, okay, I can do that. Let's just be upset together. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And that was just such a beautiful moment for me. So I encourage as much as I possibly can to try to have that open communication and hopefully not offend somebody when you say, stop. That's not what I need from you right now.
Right. Mm-hmm. Boundaries are important.
Yeah. Right. So let's talk about the foundation a little bit.
Yes.
And how that kind of started and just those first stages of that.
So I feel like I kind of fell into this. Kian passed away and I was like, I can't get flowers. I mean, I think I've said this so many times now to various people because everyone's like, how did I get started? I was like, I didn't want flowers. I did not want people to send flowers to my house. I love flowers, right? I love flowers and I don't want to associate them with my son's passing.
Well, you know what I had a problem with is I didn't want to watch them die.
Yes.
I didn't want to watch the flowers die.
100%. I have a kind of a green thumb for herbs, right? But every time I get an orchid, no matter how hard I try, no matter what I read and what instructions I follow, the darn thing dies, right? So, and it makes me feel worse, right?
Right.
I'm like, someone gave me this beautiful gift and
I just killed it
into my care and I killed it, right? And of course,
I've killed every plant but two. I have two left from the funeral. All the rest of them are dead. Right. Yeah. And it makes you feel awful.
It makes you feel awful because it was given to you in remembrance of a person that you lost. And then you lose the thing that was given to you. I mean, I could really spiral, right?
Right. And the cut flowers are worse because those you just watch them wilt and all the petals fall off and them turn brown.
So sad. Yeah, I know. I was creating too many analogies in my head, with the thought of getting flowers to be like, I can't live like this. So
we got a lot of flowers at the funeral home and at the funeral, and I pretty much gave all of them away, as quickly as I could, because just the idea of watching them wilt just was so hard. Yeah.
That was smart. So I think you could tell by my previous story about how we reacted to diagnosis. I'm very much get into action mode. And I was like, I don't want flowers. Right. So what do I do? What do I want? Right. And I was like, well, I want his passing to mean something more than it means to just me.
Yep.
And so Mike and I talked, we actually were talking a bit about this, as Kian was passing, and we both agreed that we would like to find some place to make a difference in Kian's name. And so I think a day or so after he passed, I called his oncologist and I was like, please give me some options. I don't want to get flowers. I want to redirect people. I need to do it quickly because people are going to want to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me the options. And one of the options was with Dana-Farber, with one of the doctors that consulted on Kian's case. Her name is Dr. Mullen.
Mm-hmm.
And she is just the most amazing human being. I remember when we went to see her for a second opinion, she first of all, like, we were 45 minutes late to the appointment, and she didn't truncate our time. I mean, it was in Boston, so it was like a big trip. She didn't truncate our time. She like held our hands. She, had somebody else, like, I think, answering her pages, like, so that she could be fully focused unless there was like an emergency she had to like take care of. I mean, it was just the type of treatment you want from a doctor that sees you as a human and not like a clinical number or, a family with a sick kid. And she gave us like such hope. I remember she palpated his belly and she goes, "It's still soft, like 8 weeks out from like initial diagnosis." She goes, "This is good reason to be hopeful." And I said, "Thank you." Like, nobody else had given that to us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so when his primary oncologist told us this, I was like, that's where the money should go, to Dr. Mullen and her renal tumor fund, so that it can be directed to do this. So we started a giving page with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Mm-hmm. And I told Dr. Mullen on that phone, I mean, she probably thought I was grief-stricken and like crazy, but I was like, "Listen, I have huge decision fatigue. I need this money to go to someone I trust, which is you. And I want to raise $100,000. And she was like, yeah, even $20 makes a difference," which it does. It totally does. We say this all the time to our donors, like, a dollar makes a difference to us. And she's like, "Just take your time. Don't." and then we started. And I think within 4 months, we raised like close to 46,000.
Wow.
And then we did our first event for Dana-Farber in May of last year, Mother's Day weekend of 2021. And we raised like over $20,000 at that event. I ended up shaving my hair off to raise money. And then I was like, this feels like really good and in alignment with my purpose in like life, a broader thing to do, and something that gives me so much joy to give back and honors Kian. And really it's just being, I mean, it brings us a lot of joy as a family. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I want to do more. I have all these ideas, all these partnerships I want to foster. Mike had, he was really adamant, like, raising money for pediatric cancer research is great, but what about the families that need treatment now? And that's kind of how it started with like, well, do we form our own nonprofit?
Yeah.
And we did. We started in the summer of last year thinking about the names and branding and like kind of our mission statement. Mm-hmm. And we officially launched in September of 2021. So 9 months in. And yeah, and we hit the $100,000 goal last year. So that was super exciting for us, and I'm sure for Dana-Farber. And it's nice to see how kind of our mission has evolved. It's twofold. So, we're going to continue supporting pediatric cancer research with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, mm-hmm. and very, very specific types of research initiatives. And we're lending support to families that have kids in treatment and care. Families and caregivers that have kids are impacted by kids that are in treatment. So we've been sending meals to the hospital staff. We have a form that families can fill out if they need to receive meals or some help around, help with nourishment. They can definitely reach out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's when their kids are kind of going through the treatments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it's when your kids are going through treatment. I mean, it was like the one thing that Mike and I felt like, to have a nutritious meal dropped off that you didn't have to clean after or do anything is like a game changer, right? No one had to cook. No one had to go to the grocery store. I didn't necessarily feel bad about throwing out food because it had gone bad in the fridge because I didn't get a chance to cook it. It's just one of those things. It's very simple. Get a meal delivered, have dinner with your family, and then the cleanup is fast, right? And you can just try to focus on being present as opposed to, now I got to do the dishes and whatever else.
Yeah, I think about that too. Obviously, after Andy died, we had a wonderful meal train that went on for months from my church and my friends, and that was extremely helpful. But I have a foster son who underwent a kidney transplant, and he had his kidney transplant on the 14th of June. In what year was it now? It's been 5 years ago now, so 20 or maybe 6 years, 2016, 2017. Anyway, he I had this kidney transplant and he had a lot of complications. So I didn't miss much work, honestly. I would go to work and then immediately after work, I would be at the hospital. And I would oftentimes, most of the time, I'd spend the night in the hospital. I would get up, I would go to work. I was doing all of the like normal stuff.
Yeah.
But yet I was hardly seeing the rest of my family because one of us was always in the hospital with him. He was there 2-3 weeks and then he was home for a few days and then he was back in. I mean, that summer he was hospitalized 3 or 4 times. So it was a really hard summer. And it's funny because no one thought like, hey, maybe some meals would be helpful to her.
Yeah.
Because I was still showing up and seeing my patients and doing normal stuff, but no one thought about the fact that that would be nice, you know?
Yeah. Which is something
because that would have been really helpful to me had the hospital maybe offered that, because obviously they were getting to know us pretty well because we'd been there a long time in that unit. And had we been asked that, I probably would have taken him up on it, but it was hard for me to ask my coworkers and friends in church, like, hey, you know what? I really would appreciate somebody feeding my family, because now I'm spending the time with Valeriano and I'm feeling really guilty because I've got 3 other kids at home and my husband, and they're not getting decent meals because I'm here so much.
Right. Right. And, you know, when you have a long-term diagnosis or something that's not like a death or, you know, something that's like very sudden and tragic, when it's something that you kind of learn or that you live with, people forget that it still adds or detracts from like the other avenues of your life. Right. And it's like this with pediatric cancer treatment, right? Families spend months at the hospital, depending on the type of treatment. We would be there for weeks, but there are families that spend 30 days in treatment at the hospital. And so they either have other kids and other family members that are home that still need support and a good meal. But like from the outside, unless you are familiar with what treatment looks like, you think they're just kind of managing it all because that's what it looks like. You just integrate it into your life, but it doesn't mean that your life is easy. It just means you still need more support, right?
Yeah. So, I remember now, after this was all done and things were better, one of our nurses had a child get a very bad illness and she had a lot of other kids at home, and the office did do like a little meal thing for her and offer that. And I remember saying to the like some of the other, you know, my office manager and things like that, I said, you know, I'm glad we're doing that. That would have been really helpful to me. I mean, I actually said that because, and I don't think people thought about that either, because I'm like a doctor. And so I should be able to, I don't know, I have more money that I could pay for meals or whatever, but that's not the same. Right. And just because what I really needed was some love kind of shown to our family. It doesn't really matter what your financial situation is. And if I could afford to get my family pizza every night, because honestly, I could have afforded to give my family pizza every night, but that's not what I want to do. That's not how.
100%. It's not the financial component, right? It's the mental fatigue of having to make yet another decision for your loved ones. Or worry that it's like not a nutritious one, because again, you're tired. You're already making critical decisions either in your day job and then for like a child that like needs a little bit of extra love and for yourself. And then it's nice to have someone come in and be like, here's a meal that your family will love and you didn't have to think about it. Just appears.
And like, I now can be less stressed because I know that my family's eating there and I'm not feeling this torn, like I should be with the other kids. Right.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's a strange thing that happened that shouldn't have happened, but you feel this guilt. Like after Andy died, I thought to myself, man, I almost missed a whole summer with him because of being with Valeriano and the kidney transplant. And I mean, what a stupid thought to have, but I'm thinking to myself, oh, I wish I would have had that time, right? I didn't know. I didn't know I wasn't going to have that time. I didn't know this was going to happen.
100%. 100%. I think about that all. Yep. You know, I shouldn't have gone back to work. I should have stayed home for those 2 years. I should have.
Right.
Yeah. Cause you're like, you know.
And not that I regret. Obviously my foster son needed support in the hospital. I mean, he would call me and say, when are you coming? He did not like being there by himself. Especially he's from Guatemala. His English wasn't the best. I mean, we are his only support system in this community. And so I needed to be there for him. But Absolutely. You do have these thoughts like, oh, I should have done this, these regrets. Like if I only would have known, I would have spent more time. I would have done this differently. I would have done that differently.
Totally.
I think it's part of just losing a child. They end up with these silly regrets, but
I mean, I'd say I think it's even part of being a parent of multiples, right? Because I have regrets over having to prioritize Kian, even though he passed, and missing out time with Yara.
Yeah.
And in a way that I couldn't integrate them both into the experience, right? I couldn't take her to her hospital visits, especially not during the pandemic, right? Like,
right. They wouldn't let you.
Yeah. Mike and I could barely go together, and we had a child under the age of 2, So parenting is probably the best, one of the most wonderful experiences of my life, and also the most heartbreaking for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So tell us the name of the organization.
Yeah, sorry. Organization's name is, it is like sitting in your living room having a conversation. I'm just kind of, chatting away with us.
I know.
The organization's name is RAR for Kian. It comes from, he had a little dinosaur buddy that he called RAR, and he used to like hide behind like corners, and then he'd pop out and go, RAR. So we just wanted to really invite some playfulness to it. Cancer is a very serious topic. Pediatric cancer is extremely exhausting for families and scary. And we still wanted to be able to like embody some of that Kian energy and joy. So it's kind of like what we went through is like having something that was a bit more playful, and it's spelled RAWR. So like really like RAR.
Yeah. Yeah.
RAR for Kian.
And then you help families just basically in that hospital system that you were associated with?
No, it could be any family. We have sent meals to some families, I think in North Carolina, maybe so far, but like, we're open and happy to help any families that need help. So if anyone wants to go to rarforkian.org, there is a sign up sheet there. If a family that would like to receive, a family that's in pediatric cancer care that would like to receive meals, or caregivers in that community talking about hospital staff, please go ahead, fill out the form, reach out to us. We'd love to help.
Yeah. So you're just kind of trying to expand, and you're just starting.
We're just starting. We want this to be a very nourishing experience for our families and our caregivers that are impacted by pediatric cancer.
I just think it's beautiful. I am so excited to get to help kind of spread the word about this and help people think about it, because it is important to be able to care for the whole family, not just the child. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful or would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can text Andy's Mom to the number 53555 or visit the donate page on andysmom.com. Your donations are secure and tax deductible, and we are now able to accept Venmo, PayPal, and Apple Pay. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 organization and can receive donations through smile.amazon.com, Thrivent Financial, and Benevity, amongst others. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com. Also, be sure to sign up for the email list to receive weekly updates as well as pictures of all of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.